All right, let's jump straight into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking something that is honestly completely transformative. We're going to dive into how a really elegant system of 5 Japanese philosophies can help you finally and permanently break those deep-rooted bad habits. If you've ever felt completely stuck on a hamster wheel of negative routines, well, the structured approach we're about to explore is going to totally flip how you look at personal change. But before we get to the solution, we really have to ask ourselves, why do our attempts to break bad habits almost always fail? I mean, think about it for a second. How many times have you, or maybe someone you know, totally sworn off junk food, dropped a ton of money on a gym membership, or locked into this really rigid New Year's resolution, only to completely abandon ship 3 weeks later? We've all been there, right? Standard diet plans and quick fix mentalities almost always end in just pure exhaustion and failure. And it's because we try to change every single thing about our lives all at exactly the same time. To really understand how to break this toxic cycle, we need to talk about a guy named David. David was your pretty typical hardworking dad. He was 40 years old, and just the sheer stress of life over the years had pushed his weight up to 140 kilograms. Now, his wake-up call wasn't some stern warning from a doctor. He'd already had plenty of those. His actual rock bottom came one afternoon when his kid's plastic ball rolled into a neighbor's yard. David walked over to grab it, lost his footing, and collapsed right there on the grass. Sweating, totally out of breath, and just completely drained of strength, he couldn't even push himself off the ground. And the absolute worst part, his 9-year-old son was standing right there, watching the whole thing happen. The profound shame of that specific moment was what finally pushed David to get real help. But here's the twist. David didn't go to your standard dietitian. He went to a doctor who actually specialized in mindset and philosophy. So David sits down, explains his long, frustrating history of failed crash diets, and the doctor doesn't hand him a meal plan, no list of foods to avoid. Instead, he confronts David with a really harsh mathematical reality about how he's been spending his time. And that reality was just 10%. The doctor hit him with this incredibly profound truth. He said, the amount of time that you are giving to create your best version is not even 10% of the time that you have given to create your worst version. I mean, wow. He pointed out the sheer injustice of what David was expecting of himself. Think about it. He had spent literal decades building up this lifestyle of stress eating and not moving, but then he'd get incredibly angry at himself when he couldn't undo 40 years of damage with just 3 weeks of a starvation diet. We are such impatient creatures. We expect instantaneous transformation. And honestly, that right there is our very first mistake. So the doctor gives David this wildly unconventional micro-challenge. Seriously, there were no brutal 2-hour boot camps, no fasting. In fact, he explicitly told David to keep eating his pizzas and keep drinking his beers for the next 2 weeks. The one and only rule, drink 1 single glass of water every morning the exact second you wake up. That is literally it. David honestly felt like he was being scammed, but whatever. He agreed to do it. Why? Because the doctor knew it wasn't about weight loss yet. It was simply about practicing how to keep a ridiculously small promise to yourself. And that brings us right to our very first Japanese philosophy, Kaizen. Basically, Kaizen is the practice of improving just 1% daily through small, continuous changes. By just waking up and drinking that 1 glass of water for 2 solid weeks, David proved to himself that he could keep a promise. That tiny, almost effortless act became his keystone habit. It was the foundational trigger that actually proved to his skeptical brain that change was possible. He didn't have to scale the entire mountain on day 1. He literally just needed to take 1 single step. So, once that keystone habit was completely locked in, the doctor introduces the next 1% phase. And notice how beautifully simple this is. Step 1, eat exactly what you normally eat. Pizza, whatever, but just serve yourself half the portion. Step 2, wait 20 minutes. That's it. We have all been guilty of shoveling down food and rushing back for seconds, right? But the rule was, if you are genuinely still hungry after those 20 minutes are up, go ahead and eat the rest. Absolutely no guilt attached. Which brings us nicely to the second philosophy, Hara Hachi Bu. This is the practice of eating until you're only about 80% full. And the science behind this is super fascinating. See, our brains actually have a lag time when processing signals from our stomachs. By just waiting that 20 minutes, David gave his brain the necessary time to catch up and realize, oh hey, I'm actually satisfied. And guess what? Most of the time, he didn't even want the second half of his food. It created this totally balanced intake without him ever feeling deprived, and that naturally led to an effortless initial 3-kilogram weight loss. Okay, next up, the doctor asked David to add a micro movement to his day. Once again, no gym memberships. He literally just had to walk from his front door, down the street to his mailbox, and back. We're talking maybe 40 meters total. But then something kind of magical happened. His 7-year-old daughter, who had honestly stopped asking him to play because he was always too tired, saw him walking out there every single day. So she just started joining him. And those little mailbox walks naturally turned into walks to the corner of the street purely because they were just enjoying their time talking and hanging out together. Connecting with his daughter like that revealed our third core concept, ikigai. This basically translates to your reason for doing what you're doing, your life's purpose. You see, when the doctor asked David why he was trying to lose weight, David suddenly realized his underlying motivation wasn't about hitting some arbitrary number on a scale. His ikigai was his family. He wanted to be physically strong enough to support them, to run around with his kids, and to actually be alive to see them grow up and get married. Without ikigai, your motivation is just going to fizzle out. But with it, you have an absolute endless supply of fuel. So you really have to ask yourself, what is yours? Now, as we all know, progress is rarely a straight, smooth line. Which brings us to a moment of intense narrative tension in David's story. Fast forward a few months, and David goes to a big family wedding. Surrounded by all that food and peer pressure, he totally caved. He ate way too much, completely broke his portion rules, and woke up the next morning in a full-blown panic. He called his doctor absolutely terrified, convinced that he'd just destroyed months of momentum in one night. He felt like a total failure. But the really crucial takeaway here is how the doctor reacted. He didn't yell, he didn't scold him. Instead, he just calmly ran through a checklist. He asked, "Did you drink your water yesterday morning?" David said yes. "Did you eat your half portions earlier in the week?" Yes. "Did you go for your walk?" Yes. The doctor just smiled and pointed out that David hadn't failed at all. He had simply stumbled. He had successfully executed every single one of his foundational habits leading up to that wedding. One bad night simply does not erase months of compounding hard work. And man, this perfectly captures the essence of our fourth philosophy, wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the celebration of imperfection. It's the total acceptance that nothing is permanent and nothing is perfectly complete. Listen to me. Perfectionism is the absolute enemy of consistency. In the past, if David made one single mistake on a strict diet, he'd just throw in the towel completely. Well, I ate a cupcake, might as well eat the whole kitchen. But by embracing wabi-sabi, David learned to finally let go of that incredibly toxic expectation. He was allowed to be imperfect, as long as he just kept going. Which leads us straight into our fifth and final philosophy, Ganbaru. Ganbaru means persisting and doing your best during difficult times without giving up. It is literally the ultimate resilience engine. When you stumble, and you will stumble, Ganbaru is that little spark of spirit that fuels you to brush the dirt off your knees and return right back to your 1% Kaizen habits the very next morning. No excuses, no throwing a pity party, just getting back to the work. So what exactly happens when you combine Kaizen, Harahachibu, Ikigai, Wabi-sabi, and Ganbaru? Well, let's map out this compounding progress, because it's wild. In the first month, just by drinking water, eating half portions, and taking tiny walks, David lost 8 kilos. At the 6-month mark, he was down 23 kilos. After a year, 35 kilos. And by the time he hit a year and a half, David had lost an absolutely unbelievable 52 kilograms. His doctor was stunned. His blood tests went from deeply, dangerously alarming to entirely healthy. And it was all from small, compounding, daily actions. But here's the thing. The true climax of David's journey, it wasn't the 52 kilos. When the doctor asked David if he ever felt the urge to just quit and go back to his old ways, David told him he couldn't even remember the last time he felt that way. He had successfully shifted from a state of trying to change to a state of having changed. He wasn't an overweight guy desperately trying to lose weight anymore. His small, consistent habits had literally forced a permanent identity shift. He was now, simply, a healthy person who drinks water, walks every day, and eats mindfully. It wasn't a routine. It became who he fundamentally was. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with one final, totally crucial question. What is your 1% Kaizen keystone habit going to be tomorrow morning? It is well past time to abandon that exhausting quick fix mindset. Seriously, don't try to reinvent your whole life today. Just pick one tiny, unbreakable promise to make to yourself tomorrow. Drink a glass of water, read exactly one page of a book, walk to the end of your driveway. What will your 1% be? Because let me tell you, that tiny 1%, that is the absolute bedrock of your brand new identity. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.